Hello, listener. The fact you hear this means you're alive. If you're new here, consider subscribing and comment below where you're listening from. Let's begin the story. It started out as a typical swing shift. Nothing on the board to make you sweat. Just a few late departures and a cargo run or two. My name is Daniel Hart, tower controller, 41, good under pressure, divorced, no kids. Picture this. A big American field with a tall glass cab and 6 long runways reaching flat to the horizon, out past the suburbs and freight yards. I had coffee in a paper cup and a checklist I could do in my sleep, and the radios were clean. Then small things went wrong. A pushback never called ready. A ground truck stopped mid-sentence and didn't answer the second hail. Center relays started clipping, then cleared up, then clipped again, worse than before. I wrote down the times. Simple is safe when the radios get weird. I kept working because that's what I know how to do. The others bailed for the elevators when the terminal went to hell, alarms blaring, shouting on the comms. I locked the tower door, ran the checklist, and decided to hold the field until someone told me to stand down. No one did. I watched the apron cameras drop one by one, the west gates, then baggage, then fuel farm. Departure slots timed out one by one. Ground went silent. It started slow, then fast. A chain reaction of small failures all in one night. And the tower, it became my whole world. After midnight, the field looked deceptively simple. Runway edges held steady, blue taxi lights marking the corners, but the terminal feeds told a different story. Ground squawked about a baggage tug near B East, then went silent. I answered, waited for a readback that never came. A minute later, the same tug trundled into view, stopped dead by the service road, hood up. Nobody behind the wheel. On the departures monitor, times kept sliding. Amber turned red, then went to canceled. I logged the codes anyway. You ride the system when it's running. You document when it crashes. Announcements blared over the terminal PA in bursts. The first set sounded normal. The next glitched, then looped, repeating itself. A security feed showed a fire alarm pulled, a crowd surging back and forth. Some running for the exits, some on their phones, some just standing there, frozen. 2 co-workers buzzed me on the intercom from downstairs. Renee said she was taking the elevator to the lot, told me to lock the cab and hold the field if anyone called. Jazz was with her, said he'd call when they cleared the bridge. His reply cut off mid-sentence. I checked the stairwell camera. 2 employees I didn't recognize tried the tower door, glanced up at the glass, then walked away. One had his sleeve pulled up over his face. Center was still up, but silent. I kept the frequencies clear, scanning every minute. A Frontier crew said they were holding short, then, "Never mind, we're parking it here," and clicked off. Security cams started dying one by one. West side first, then the hub, then baggage. When the hub went dark, the PA died with it. The loop degraded into a fast stutter, making it hard to think. Without the noise, the glass gave a disturbingly clear view of the field and the city lights beyond. I scribbled out a quick plan. Lock the cab, check the ladder hatch, kill the elevator, secure the feed closet, verify backup, count the water, set a rest timer. Cab door, locked. Ladder hatch, drop bar and pin, both secure. Elevator needed a key and a hard turn to kill it. I did that, then hit the call button to park the car. The panel lit up. Out of service. I listened. Silence. Backup power green. Water. A case under the desk, a small tank by the sink. I capped the sink, put the bottles within easy reach. The glass hadn't started baking the room yet. A woman's voice crackled over the portable radio, said she was airport fire. She had eyes on 3 people by the terminal, hurt, acting crazy. One trying to stand on a busted leg, another biting his own hand, wouldn't let go. I asked if she needed a gate or a clear lane. She said negative, she was heading for her truck. Then, "Someone's already on it," and the radio screeched like metal on metal. She didn't answer when I called again. The tower phone started ringing, kept ringing. I ignored it. You can't run a field by phone. I kept scanning the radios, scribbling notes in the log. Down on the field, everything was still, eerily still. Vehicles abandoned where they stopped, a set of chocks lying in the middle of a lane, an empty wheelchair rolling slowly downhill, bumping into a post, then stopping. I tried the emergency line to airport ops. It rang and rang, then kicked over to a recording. I wrote Ops NA at 0052, underlined it hard. I was on my own, until I wasn't. Something thumped once in the elevator shaft. Not loud, just a single thud like a weight finding a purchase. I froze, counted to 3, then hit the call button again. The panel stayed dark except for the faint out-of-service glow. The shaft remained silent. A figure moved on the service road. Not a truck, a person, walking with his knees wide, hands low. He turned his head toward the tower like he heard something. He faced the terminal, took 3 quick steps toward a wall and slammed into it with his shoulder. Backed up, hit it again. Then he just stood there listening. I killed the fan, kept quiet. On the far side, the emergency exit by C concourse burst open. A group stumbled out, scattering when the door slammed shut. Some ran, one crawled, another just spun in circles. A man frantically waved both arms at the tower. There was no plan I could give them that didn't start with, "Get away from the noise!" The intercom crackled from downstairs, a male voice. "Is the elevator working?" I said, "Out of service." He asked, "Turn it back on." I said, "Can't do that and keep the tower secure." He just said, "Please," then nothing. The stair camera later showed the same guy, ear pressed to the door, stepping back, then slamming his shoulder against it. It didn't budge. He glanced down the elevator shaft and walked out of frame. Radios remained silent. The scratching of pencil on paper and the low hum of runway transformers filled the cab. The man on the service road was gone. Vanished. Then the elevator call light flicked on by itself. I watched the elevator call light was still glowing, holding steady. The car should have been parked on the ground floor, locked out. That light shouldn't be on. I yanked open the breaker cover, killed the power, and stuffed the key in my pocket. I worked in steps. Keeps you honest. Power off. Key out. Call button still lit. Number. It died. I grabbed a do not energize card, slid it into the frame, and taped it down. The shaft was the main risk, a straight shot from the ground to the cab. I needed a barrier, something more than a switch. I grabbed the tool tote, pry bar, 4 wedges, duct tape, and a roll of plastic. The ladder hatch had a steel lip. I wedged it tight, tapped it snug, and ran tape across the seam. I marked the time. I checked the equipment closet, 2 clean agent cylinders and a small panel. The label was simple, pull for discharge. That would flood the closet, the nearby chases. I left it alone. Use it, you own it. And I still needed air. Back in the cab, I stared at the floor window over the shaft. Thick, clear. I shoved a steel cabinet over it, then stacked 3 water cases on top. Weight wasn't a lock, but it bought time. I wedged 2 desk chairs against the cabinet, tied them with cords so they wouldn't slide. The cab door had a 3-point latch. I slammed it shut, threw the deadbolt, and dropped a metal bar across the brackets. Dust said nobody had used that bar in years. I muffled the hammer face with a rag and tape, did the same for the pry bar. I slid rubber mats under the chair legs, cabinet feet. HVAC was going to be a problem. With the elevator and hatch sealed, the room would bake. I checked the vent grill, core shaft feed. I closed it to a sliver, taped the edges to kill the rattle. Then I cracked a side window, 1 finger width, taped a folded wipe in the gap. I inventoried what I had. Water, 24 half-liter bottles plus a small tank. Food, a box of bars, a drawer of snacks. Light, 2 headlamps, 3 chem sticks, a crank radio. Power, cab ups, console batteries, a hand crank for the radio if the main bus went down. I snapped a picture so I wouldn't have to remember all the numbers later. The radios were silent except for a burst from approach, just static. I logged the time, went back to the seal. The seams around the floor window were still exposed. I cut plastic, taped a skirt around the cabinet, sealed it tight so nothing could creep up from below. Then I ran tape wide across the floor. I made a loop of the room, set foam earplugs in a cup, and put a spare radio on scan. The stair camera, empty. The apron cameras were dead except for one facing the long-term lot. It showed a box truck parked across 2 lanes. Another dead end. A thud came from the shaft, not metal on metal, more like skin on glass. I put my palm on the window and felt a faint tremor. The service hatch above the stairwell landing. That was the bypass. If someone climbed, that was the way in. I peered through the crack in the stair door. The landing was empty. The hatch was 8 feet up, screwed shut. I dragged a chair over, stood on it, added 2 more screws through the tabs, then looped cord through the handle, tied it to the rail. I added a line to the plan. Seal, then decoy. Noise was drawing them in. Maybe noise could draw them away. The terminal PA was zoned. If I could push sound to the far gates, I could take the pressure off the tower. I fired up a small amp, checked the levels. No hiss, no clipping. I selected the gates on the far side, typed in a short loop. Maintenance test. Please clear this area. I kept the volume low, then bumped it up a notch, watching the lot camera. 3 figures turned toward the concourse. Good. I went back to the shaft. The panel light was dead and the cabinet sat where I left it. A draft slipped up around the edges, night air or air from below, I couldn't tell. I added tape and pressed the skirt flat. A slow breath rose from the core, not words. 2 pushes of air, then a pause, like someone trying to match a sound. I said, "Oh, not today," and slid a second cabinet onto the stack. I wrote a card for the clean agent closet. Check vent, mask, pull, weight 30, vent small. I taped it to the handle. I killed the floor lights, left only the console strips glowing. Outside, nothing moved. The far PA loop ended. I programmed a second, a 3-tone chime, a short announcement about a test. The hand sound in the shaft stopped. I stayed with the plan. Door set, hatch wedged, shaft weighted and skirted, second cabinet placed, clean agent ready, vents controlled, decoy live. I took a picture of the door bar and set the phone face down. I drank a half bottle of water and wrote 1/2 on the cap. I ate 1 bar and wrote the flavor on the wrapper. The console chimed, a lost feed, went black, then flickered back on backup. I switched to the hand crank generator, gave it a slow pull to charge the radio. The motion sent a hum through the floor. I stopped, listened. I turned the radio to scan again. A man's voice cut in with 3 words, then static. "If you hear..." And nothing. I answered with my call sign and the field name. No reply. I logged the time and put a star next to it. A scrape touched the stair door from the other side, low and patient. The screw heads on the hatch above the landing turned a fraction, then stopped. I kept the decoy loop running on the far gates, turned the cab volume down low so it wouldn't bleed into the room. From up here, the field seemed calm. Blue taxi lights in line, runway edges steady, windsocks barely twitching. But the few cameras still online showed frozen minutes, a world stopped. I cycled through the radios. Ground, tower, approach, guard, short calls, field name, time, 10 seconds between each, pen on paper to keep me from rushing. Guard was the first to answer, a clipped recording. Stay off highways, avoid dense areas, restarting at the same point every time. Something bumped a service door on C concourse, tripped a motion light. 3 shapes emerged from the dark like they'd heard a dinner bell. Stood under the bulb, staring at the wall. One raised both hands, tapped on the glass. The sensor clicked off. They froze. I asked if any aircraft were inbound. No answer. I marked the time and drew a square around it. Power flickered, consoles blinked, kicked over to backup and lost 2 more feeds. I reoriented around fewer eyes on the ground. If I couldn't see a lane or a corner, it didn't exist. A siren wailed past the perimeter, then died. The 3 shapes under the seat door tilted toward the sound, moved slowly, then faster, breaking into a jerky, unnatural run. The siren stopped. They stopped. The tower phone rang. I let it go and watched the long-term lot. Headlights turned between rows and went dark. The emergency binder was useless. Fire, smoke, crash, bomb, shooter, evacuation. Nothing for this. I made my own page. Door, hatch, shaft, HVAC, water, food, radio, decoy. One action, one fallback for each. Static hissed on approach, then a woman's voice, fast and clear. Flight number, captain down, door blocked by a cart, needed lights, heading. I told her the field had power, straight in from the west for the long runway. Gave her a heading altitude. She said thanks. I said, say again, souls on board. Static swallowed her reply, then spat it back out. Half a word, a B, and... I cranked the runway lights to bright for 10 seconds, back to medium, then bright again. A see me when you don't share a frequency. Nothing on the horizon, no beacons, no strobes. I kept the lights steady, scribbled down where I could see them if she tried again. I split the next minutes with jobs. I checked the door bar, the hatch screws, the window skirt, spun the strap 10 strokes and returned to the scope. The far gate loop ran. Maintenance test. Please clear this area. Then tones, then silence. I kept the volume low, just enough to push attention away from the tower. Guard coughed up a fragment, a male voice, mile marker, the word burn. A second voice. Don't use flares, they draw them. Horn. Short, long, then move. I had horns and I had a timer. Something hit the base of the tower, short, hollow, a jolt of steel through my feet. I held my breath, counted to 5. It didn't repeat. A minute later, a scraping sound on the concrete by the service door, then the same scrape on the far side. Testing a path. I stayed still, heart hammering. The lot cam showed 2 people climb out of a car and crouch. They kept the cars between them in open lanes. I turned a flood on the closest row to low. One looked up, pointed at the light, then at the tower, then at the terminal. He tapped the other on the shoulder and they moved deeper into the rows. They moved like they had practiced it before. The elevator call light flickered again. The car was dead and the key was in my pocket. The glow faded and a warm plastic smell came up the shaft. I set my palm on the cabinet and felt a thin vibration. Approach came back with a new loop. Divert to fields with no crowds, avoid cities. The word crowds felt wrong after what I'd seen under that door. Those weren't crowds. I added one line to my page. When in doubt, kill noise and listen. I cut the decoy volume by 1 step, brought the runway lights down to medium and waited. The woman's voice came back on approach, clear and close, like she had moved right under us. She said, I can see your lights. And then the frequency went dead. I silenced the room, then focused on the air. The cab was small, a heat trap when the sun came up. The fan helped, but noise drew attention. I set the meter on the desk, let it settle. The number crept up, then stopped at an acceptable level. I logged it, along with the time. 2 steps higher, and I'd crack the window a finger width. Keep the fan off. Next, water. 24 half-liter bottles plus the sink tank, about 6 liters. Rationing to 1.5 liters a day gave me 9 or 10 days, with a little wiggle room. I marked 4 bottles for today, slid the rest into the shadows. Food stayed simple. Bars, packets, a few cans. I set a rule. 2 bars and 1 packet per day unless I work hard. Moving cabinets or running the strap counts as hard work and earns a 3rd bar. Waste has to be sealed. I line a bin with 2 bags, add a little bleach and tape the lid. It sits by the door for less smell. Sleep needs a timer. I set 2-hour blocks with 5-minute checks between. The alarm buzzes under my wristband so it won't ring across the cab. Back to air. The fan added a low hum through the glass. I killed it for a minute, watched the meter creep up a notch, then hold. Another minute, steady. Fan off unless the heat forced my hand. The window gap uses a wipe as a filter. A folded cloth works better. I wet it with a cap of water, press it into the tape, and add a 2nd line to stop flutter. The vent on the core shaft still pulls a little at a sliver. I tape 2 edges and leave 1 corner bare to break whistle. Power next. The cab ups showed hours at the current draw. I shut down 2 screens, dimmed the rest. Slow cranks on the hand strap would cover radio use if the main bus went down. Air meter every 15 minutes for an hour, then every half hour. Water, 4 bottles marked, 1 cap for cloth per check. Food, 2 bars, 1 packet, 3rd bar only after heavy work. Power, dim screens, strap at quarter speed, check batteries each hour. Sleep, 2 hours on, 5 minutes scan. Repeat. I opened the window another finger and checked the meter. It stayed calm. Nothing moved on the field. The lot camera shows empty lanes and a jacket on a mirror. The stair camera holds. Hatch screws haven't moved. The tape seam lies smooth. I set a fingertip on the door for 10 seconds and feel no vibration. Noise needs a hard look. Runway lights hum on high, so I bring them down to low. The far gate loop runs on a timer. 30 seconds on, 2 minutes off, then a tone. That keeps the draw without turning into a beacon. 10 minutes with the fan off raises the meter 1 notch and leaves it there. Sweat runs down my neck and goes cool in the draft from the cloth. Quiet matters more than comfort. For the next hour, I keep a routine. Check the shaft weight, check the hatch, check the meter, scan radios, sip water, note changes. At the 7-minute mark, a warm plastic smell comes from the shaft, faint but clear. I set my palm on the cabinet stack and feel a soft tremor through the metal. If the air holds, the fan stays off and the window stays narrow. If it drifts high, I open the gap and accept the noise risk. Light adjustments come last. I dim console strips to the edge of readable. Headlamps with red filters sit ready with spare cells. Glow sticks stay sealed. Supplies boiled down to a line I could repeat. Air stable, water rationed, food paced, power trimmed, sleep scheduled. I'd stick to the plan. Quiet bought time, kept the visitors away. Small steps adding up while the field stayed silent. I needed to bleed the pressure off the tower. My answer, a sound plan, something to draw attention away from me toward the empty parts of the field. The far gates were perfect, long glass, hard surfaces, all echoing chambers. The PA let me zone the sound, set the times. I kept the volume low, didn't want the cab ringing in my ears. First pass stayed simple. A chime, a short notice, 30 seconds of nothing, then the chime again. I staggered 2 zones so the sound would feel like it walked. The goal was to pull anything listening toward the west fence. Horn timing from guard, short, long, sat in my notes. Field vehicles had roof horns and so did the standby units by the maintenance shed. I didn't want a steady blast that would build a crowd. Short patterns act like breadcrumbs that lead away from the glass. Power mattered. I put each lure on a 2-minute cycle with a 4-minute rest. Consoles dimmed, runway lights stayed low, strap generator ready if the bus dipped. I wrote the order on a pad. West chime, shed horns, cargo tone, satellite chime, repeat. On the lot cam, 2 people moved between cars and paused when the first chime played, then angled west. By the sea door, a shape raised its head and turned, took a few steps, then started an odd jog with shoulders tight and knees wide. I kept the tower quiet. The cargo tone ran next, a low beep that carried more than a voice. Figures near the baggage tunnel lifted their chins and drifted toward it. One ran, then stopped when the tone cut, standing like it had lost the path. Shed horns went last. I tapped the pattern and cut them. Movement rippled across the far edge of the field, all pointed away from the tower. I added a chime at an old satellite concourse with nobody in it. The glass was cracked and the roof sagged, but the sound still bounced. A few shapes peeled off from the main group and angled toward that echo. The plan needed depth. If something reached the first lure and found nothing, it should hear the next one before it drifted back. I offset cycles so a new sound would start before the last died, then wrote the offsets on the pad. A crew cart sat by a jet bridge. I toggled its horn once. The speaker squealed, then worked, so I gave it a single short and let the timer take over. Runway edge lights held on low. The elevator call light blinked once and stayed dead. The warm plastic smell faded. I kept the cabinet stacked tight and checked the door bar with a fingertip for buzz, then kept the room still. 2 more shapes slipped out of the terminal and headed west in a half run. One fell and the other dragged him by the collar and kept moving. When the cargo tone played again, they turned their heads and followed the fence. I recorded the pattern because notes survive when you're tired. West chime, shed horns, cargo tone, satellite chime. I said into the mic on low gain. 2 on, 4 off, offset 1 minute, and added, runway low, tower dark, fan off. Noise discipline kept me honest. I didn't touch the fan. I didn't bump a chair. Shoes stayed on rubber mats and hands stayed steady. At the 40-minute mark, I added a 5th lure. The fuel farm had a service bell on a door sensor. I set it to ping twice, pause and ping once more. The sound was dull but traveled across metal. Several figures near the maintenance road turned and began a slow walk that way. The UPS load held and the strap stayed coiled. The meter stayed steady. A lone figure stood under the tower and craned his neck. He turned a slow circle and sniffed. When the shed horn sounded, he pressed his palms to his ears and still turned that way. I touched the glass. The cloth at the window gap moved a little. The far chime failed once and didn't restart on schedule. I tapped the key, sent it again, then cut it to avoid stacking sounds. The group at the satellite concourse drifted until the next tone pulled them deeper into the dead wing. The pattern still held. On guard, someone said, "Don't sing, don't clap, don't hit the horn." Then another voice said, "Short bursts only," and the frequency washed out. I kept the pattern going. It wasn't pretty, but it was clean and clean holds. Then the knot in my gut tightened. The apron camera showed a new problem. A cluster by the west fence turned as one, pointed toward the tower, not the lures. It wasn't the sound this time. Something else had their attention. And they were coming straight for me. The pattern on the field held for a while, then thinned. Fewer shapes chased the lures. A small group kept drifting back to the tower like a compass stuck on one heading. Sound worked, but not on everyone. Air stayed stable. The cloth at the window gap felt cool. Rubber mats killed squeaks. The cabinet stack over the floor window hadn't shifted. A soft tap came from the stairwell side, low and careful. Not a kick. A test. I cut console strips to half, stood by the door, and watched the screw heads on the service hatch above the landing. One turned a quarter and stopped. Another twitched. No speeches, checklist only. Bar set, deadbolt set, hinge pins taped, gaps taped, frame seams taped. The drop bar sat true in its cups. A palm press didn't move it. A slow scratch ran across paint. Pause. A second scratch higher, like someone stood on the rail and reached up. The stair camera caught a slice of motion and lost it. The clean agent closet sat 5 steps from the door. A dump would choke the service space and make a climber rethink the job, but it would also steal my air through leaks. I read my note. Check vent. Mask. Pull. Weight 30. Vent small. And set the mask where my hand would find it. Another quarter turn. A washer chirped. I pictured a hand turning a driver until the head cammed out. Small turns add up when no one interrupts. Tape alone might not hold if a hinge popped. Wedges could help if they didn't sing. I slid 2 wood shims under the sweep and tapped them with the rag-wrapped hammer until the tap went dull. The shaft gave a short knock, glass to glass, as if a palm found the floor window and tested weight from below. The cabinet stack stayed put. I tightened cords so a bump wouldn't walk the chairs. Noise discipline stayed tight. Fan off. Radios at 1 notch. PA on lures only. Scratch marks reached the top screw. The head turned an eighth and didn't turn back. I needed a hard stop. Cord was soft. The pry bar could bridge rail to rail. I tied 2 lengths, wrapped the bar, and cinched it to the rail. If the hatch dropped, steel would meet steel. The stair camera blinked and came back. An eye slid into the edge of the frame for half a second, glassy and wide, then disappeared. Heat ticked up 1 notch. I opened the window gap a finger and wet the cloth. The wick sound filled the cab and then went quiet. The elevator call light glowed for 2 seconds and died. Warm plastic drifted up the shaft. I added tape to the skirt and pressed it flat. I set the PA to a far door and cued 1 chime to see if the stairwell shape would chase sound. The head turned on camera. The screws didn't move. Whoever stood there wasn't hunting noise. He was working. A screw fell and rang on the landing. I chalked a dot on the door where that screw lined up so I'd know what to watch. The hatch flexed a hair. Wood held a plate. Metal wanted to move. I tightened the lash on the pry bar and shoved a chair tighter under it. If I could drag this out 5 minutes, the next lure cycle would pull the field again and leave fewer free to test the tower. I counted 60 and listened. Another screw turned. A second ring hit. The hatch dipped and settled against the bar. The lash held. The bar creaked. "Hold," I said to keep my hands still. The camera finally saw the hand. Nails gone. Skin torn. Fingers worked like they were learning the job fresh. They kept turning, steady and slow. Mask ready, seal checked. I set the pull handle in my palm. If the hatch dropped 1 more inch, I would flood the space, count to 30 and crack the vent. The hatch shifted a full inch. The rail screamed, the bar groaned, time stopped. I pulled to fire, now. I held the pull handle and waited for the next hit. It never came. The hatch pressed against the bar and stayed there like whoever was there had stepped back. I kept my hand on the handle now. A voice crackled over the stair mic, low and steady, almost too steady. "Don't dump that gas, please." "It's me. Maintenance." The camera showed a hard hat light, a face streaked with dust. "Name's Noah Patel, electrician," if he was telling the truth. "Where did you come from?" I asked. He said he crossed the terminal roof, came down 2 flights, and hid in an equipment closet when the concourse went bad. "I heard your chimes and followed the echo," he added. "Any bites?" "Any blood that isn't yours." He showed clean forearms and scalp, then said, "Scrapes and dust. No bites. I can help and I can keep quiet." Rule said stay sealed, but a second person changes what you can lift. "Step back 1 landing," I said. "Hands up." He stepped back. I tightened the lash, backed 2 screws out, and eased the hatch to read air. It smelled hot and stale, not sweet, not rotten. "I'm opening and closing in 5 seconds. If you move wrong, you stay out." He said understood. The hatch came down a foot, hit the bar, and held. A slim gap opened. Noah kept his hands where I could see them. "Thank you," he said. "Hold," I said, and watched the well. Nothing moved. I lifted the bar another inch, swung the hatch, and let him climb to the landing. I closed the hatch, drove the screws down, and reset the lash. "Stay by the rail," I said. "Hands open." He did. Arms, neck, hair checked clean. "Hinge downstairs," he said, pointing at his knuckle. "Dan Hart," I said. "Tower." He nodded. "Figured." "Your sound plan pulled a lot of them west," he said. I turned 2 horns off by hand when the relays started to chatter. "Do you want a second pair of hands, or do you want me gone?" he asked. "If you can follow rules, you can stay," I said. "Give me the rules," he answered. Noise first. Rubber mats, wrap tools, fan off, low radios, air next. Window gap, cloth, meter, vent tape, water and food after that. "I'll keep my voice down and my hands slow," he said. We moved to the floor window. He set his palm on the cabinet and felt the tremor. "Something in the shaft," he said. "Or the car cooling." I told him I killed power and had the key. He asked for tape and plastic. I handed both, and he rebuilt the skirt with a downfold so dust couldn't creep. We checked the cab door. He looked at the drop bar and said, "Angle the chairs so a push pulls into the jam, not away." And we shifted them. I showed him the clean agent closet and the note on the handle. "If we dump it, we vent slow," he said, and wrote the same note larger. Power drew his eye. He watched the upsload for a minute. "You're light," he said. "Keep it that way and we can ride back up through an outage." We scanned the field. I gave him the pad with the lure order and offsets. "You wrote clean," he said. The lot camera showed a jacket on a mirror. On the apron edge, a group formed, split, then formed again, pulled by 2 sounds that overlapped. "They react to patterns," he said. "Break rhythm and they stall." "What did you see inside?" "It flipped fast," he said. People yelled, hit glass, fell, then stood and ran at noise. Noah parked his pack by the desk and took out foil tape, a coil of cord, and a small headlamp. "I'll keep these here," he said. I said they could stay. "Tell me what you need," he said. "I'll do it in the order you call." I sent him to the stair camera mount. He tightened 2 screws with a coin and turned the lens to kill glare. The next lure cycle started. He listened and said, "Keep the cargo tone 2 seconds shorter than the chime." I changed the timer. We covered the downside. "If I drop," I said, "you keep the door sealed and don't try to carry me." He said, "Same for me. Seal the door and keep the plan." We both said deal. At the glass, he used my first name once. "Dan, you did the right thing," he said. The hatch stayed quiet. The lures kept pressure off. For the first time in hours, the tower held steady with 2 sets of hands. Then something big hit the side of the shaft. Dust shook from the vent and the cabinet stack gave a hard creak. Noah took the lure pad, read it, and handed it back. We moved like a small crew, quiet and direct. He checked seams, I watched the feeds, and we talked in short lines between chimes. He said, "Cargo tone in 10. I answered, "West chime ready," and we let the cycle roll. Figures along the fence drifted the way we wanted. We split tasks. He owned the stairwell and the gear closet. I owned the glass and the radios. Every 15 minutes we swapped for fresh eyes. Tape on the desk showed the checks. On guard, a voice gave the horn pattern again. Short, short, long, move. Noah whispered, "Useful, but they'll echo it," and we looked at the shaft. At 20 past, a camera came back near the rideshare loop. It showed 2 women under a streetlight. One waved a shirt. The other leaned on her and held a phone. I toggled the flood to low and clicked the mic for 3 short taps. Both looked up and started down the row, using cars for cover. Noah said, "Do we pull them here?" And I said, "We can't open." And he nodded. "Then guide them," he said. We used floods like breadcrumbs, 2 rows at a time toward the old fuel office with a steel door. Shapes near the terminal turned when the floods changed. But the lure cycle moved them west. The women crouched when a horn sounded, then ran when the tone cut. We killed the last flood so they would see the dark path. The camera lost them, then picked them up near the service road. I said, "Left at the square fence, straight to the brick box with the yellow door." Noah added, "If you hear metal, freeze and count to 30. A scrape came from the shaft and the cabinet stack flexed. Noah set his hand on it and leaned his weight. "It wants up," he said, and I said, "It doesn't get to." The women reached the yellow door and found it locked. I said, "Above the jamb, gray key box. Code is 1242. They got in. He said, "You kept 2 people alive," and I said, "Maybe." 5 minutes later, the stair mic hissed and carried a voice. A man sounded close and tired. "Tower, this is Tom. I have a boy with me. We're by the base door. He's hurt." Noah looked at me and I shook my head. "We can't open," I said. The man said, "You can. I can see the glass in the chairs. He's 10. "Are you bleeding?" I asked. "I'm not," he said. "Is the boy bitten?" I asked. "He's limping," he said. "We can't open," I said. "I can guide you." Silence for 3 beats. The boy said, "Please," and coughed. I gave them the path. "Follow the curb to the square fence left to the brick box with the yellow door," I said. "I'll light lanes as you move." "No," the man said. "They're all over there. We need high ground. Let us in." He hit the door. The bar rang. "You'll die on the stairs," I said. "We have a tight seal and short air. If the door opens, we won't close it again." Noah pointed to the camera. A group on the apron had stopped listening to the lures and was turning toward the tower. I said, "Tom, talk low and move now. I'll cover with lights." He said, "He can't run," and I said, "Then you carry him." And Noah added, "Count to 30 on the chime and move in the silence." I dropped the west lures to half and raised the satellite chime. The group split, torn between the tower and the wing. "Please," the man said again and hit the door. The bar rang higher. "We can't open," I said. "Move on the next chime." He stayed where he was. Noah spoke into the mic. "Tom, I'm maintenance. The door can't save you. The fuel office can. It locks. If you wait here, they will keep coming. Pick him up. We will walk you with light." Footsteps shifted. The man grunted, then said, "Okay." "Ready, kid?" he asked, and the boy said, "Yeah." We lit their path one pool at a time. The man breathed in counts and moved. The apron group turned back to the wing. They reached the square fence and turned left. I gave them the yellow door and said, "Key box above the jam," and heard metal click. Then the stair mic picked up a new voice by the hatch, a perfect echo of the man who called himself Tom. Same tone, same pace. It said, "Let us in," even though the real Tom was 300 yards away working the lock. My blood ran cold. Noah watched the stair cam while I checked the shaft. The cabinet stack held, but a corner of the tape skirt had lifted. I pressed it flat, added a second line, and set both palms on the steel. We needed a seal that didn't rely on power or latches. Storage held a heavy access panel with tabs and bolt holes. "Drop it over the floor window, bridge it with the pry bar, add weight." Noah said, "If we do it once." I said, "Then now." We cleared a path. Chairs out, cords loose, mats under feet. The panel rang as it slid, so we wrapped edges in cloth. I pulled the cabinets off the glass and held the skirt so it wouldn't peel. We centered the panel, turned tabs inward, and set the pry bar through 2 holes. Cord pulled the bar tight. Noah ran a strap from desk leg to bar and cranked until metal kissed frame. The sound went dull. "Wait next." Water cases, the tool tote, a drawer of manuals. "Center, then edges," he said. The skirt buried under the lip. I taped the rim. The meter held. Heat ticked up 1 notch. I opened the window gap a finger and wet the cloth. "That buys time," he said. "Only if we keep pressure off the door," I said. He shifted lure offsets by 30 seconds so a new sound started before another ended. Figures on the apron drifted west. A group that had faced the tower thinned. The stair mic crackled. A voice copied Tom and said, "Let us in." Noah watched the lens and said, "Not him." We stayed off the mic. I checked the door bar. True. Hinges taped, pins taped, wedges firm. "Add a brace," he said. We wedged a chair leg between bar and floor and taped angles so it wouldn't kick. Under the panel, something pushed once. The weight dipped and rose. The pry bar flexed and held. A light blinked as the satellite chime missed a beat. Power read good, but the timer stalled. Noah tapped the key and the cycle restarted. The fence line turned away again. He read the clean agent note. "Mask first, then pull, count to 30, then vent small. If the hatch dropped, we would choke the space and take the heat." Backup for the window seal stayed simple, the lockout key in my pocket. Noah tied the elevator handle to the desk with a tested knot. If the car moved, we would feel it. A thin scrape traced the stair door at shoulder height. Noah set his ear to the wood, then pointed at the hinge side. I ran tape from hinge to threshold and pressed it flat. The sound stopped. He wanted jobs. I gave him 3. Watch hatch screws, watch panel sag, watch ups load. I would run lures and guard. Time slid by for a second. Strap ticks, a screw sigh, cloth moving in the gap. We kept our hands slow. "We need one more dead thing we control," he said, pointing at the filing cabinet. We tipped it, slid it onto the panel, and set it. The stack weighed as much as both of us. The stair mic carried a low breath that matched mine, then quit. "It learns," he said. "Then we stay boring," I said. He tightened the strap 1 tooth and checked knots. I wrote the time and seal steps so a tired brain wouldn't have to remember. The stack creaked. Something pressed from below and searched for flex. The bar bowed and recovered. I wet the cloth and checked the meter. Stable, window narrow, fan off. Noah frowned at the hatch. 1 screw had turned a half more. He held up 2 fingers. I moved to the clean agent handle. "On your call," he said. Mask first, then pull, I said, taking the strap to charge the radio if mains died. We waited for the next move. The stair mic was dead quiet. The panel held. The lures ran on time. Too quiet. Then the hatch sagged against the pry bar with a heavy thunk. A puff of dust drifted down from the ceiling, hanging in the air like a bad omen. The hatch hit the bar and held. Dust fell. Noah said, "Waves coming," and pointed at the apron camera. Dozens moved in a loose line from the west fence. The lures pulled some away, but most ignored them. They had fixed on the tower. We had one plan: keep the tower dead and make a louder ghost on the far side of the field. I set the pad down and walked the steps so we wouldn't skip. Runway low, tower dark, window narrow, fan off, lures to east, fuel bell double ping. Shed horn silent. He said, "Ready?" I armed a new loop in the empty wing. Short tone, 3 count, short tone, 5 count, then silence. Noah angled the camera at the fence line. He said, "They'll test the base first." The first bodies reached the service road. Heads tilted, hands touched concrete, a few pressed ears to the wall. When the tone fired, only a handful turned. The rest kept coming. "Time for horns," he said. I hit the shed once, short, then again, short, and waited. Long. The mass paused. Several changed direction. We gave a second sequence and cut everything. Pressure hit the shaft. The panel bowed and popped back. Screws in the hatch turned another eighth. Noah set both palms on the bar and leaned. "Hold," he whispered. I pushed the cargo tone to the far end, then layered a low alarm from a bay. Sound walked east. Groups broke and followed, but a hard core kept lining up under us. "Next trick," he said. We killed all lures for 10 seconds. Silence worked. Faces turned left and right. The line lost shape. When the tone came from the east wing, half went with it. The base door took a hit. The drop bar rang. Tape lifted at the hinge seam. I pressed it flat and set a wedge with the rag-wrapped hammer until the tap went dull. I flashed the far runway bright, dim, a guide for any inbound and bait for the herd. Many turned their backs to us and moved. Something climbed inside the shaft. The cabinet stack vibrated. Plastic smelled hot. Noah tied a second strap from the desk to the pry bar and cranked. Metal kissed metal. The bow eased. "Fuel bell," I said. He hit the sequence. Ping, ping, pause, ping, and cut it. The herd pivoted together enough to matter. A small cluster stayed at the base and scraped. One tried the ladder and slipped. Another felt for the seam. The stair mic picked a breath that matched mine, then switched pace. I turned the gain down. Power flickered once. The ups bridged it. "We're fine," he said. We needed one push to drag the core east. I armed every east zone and set a roll. Tone, horn, bell, then tone again. He nodded. "On your call." I said, "Go." Sound ran across concourses, glass through it further. The herd broke toward the echo. We waited through 30 seconds of quiet, hands off the bar, bodies still. The base door stopped shaking. The hatch stopped sagging. The panel went still. Out on the apron, the line thinned to a tail that turned east. We held silence 10 more seconds, then gave one last tone from the farthest gate and shut it down. I lowered runway lights to low and checked the meter. Air was stable. The cloth at the window ticked once and settled. Noah nodded. "That's the first wave," he said. I said, "And we're still sealed." We let 5 minutes pass. The fence line showed backs moving away. I wrote the time and the pattern that worked. Silence, moving sound, one bright flash, then quiet. I took a sip of water, let it trickle down my throat. Rested my head against the glass. It was cold against my forehead. A soft knock came from the stair door, knuckle height, slow and steady. Deliberate. Noah pointed at the mic, shook his head, mouthed, "Don't answer." We stayed quiet. Every muscle in my body was screaming. Morning came slow. The field looked empty and the city line past it was a gray band with a few smoke columns in the wind. We kept the tower quiet. The hatch stayed braced. The door bar sat in its cups. We made the tower a repeater before noon. Guard traffic was thin, but a few voices needed a boost. Noah built a simple loop with what we had. Brief advisories, a time mark, and a reminder to avoid noise, move in short bursts, and use light only to signal. I read it each hour, then shut the set. Water and air stayed on plan. The meter rose in the afternoon and settled when the sun slid past the glass. We ate 2 bars each and kept the fan off. When the room felt close, we wet the cloth and opened the gap 1 finger, then closed it. Small moves worked. We tracked the field with fewer cameras and chose not to chase movement. If a person crossed open ground, we walked them by light toward the fuel office, then cut power so the building looked dead again. 2 made it, 1 turned back. You can lead without opening. You can help without breaking what keeps you alive. At dusk, we checked seams and wrote down the plan again so a tired brain wouldn't need to remember. Bar, wedges, panel, straps, tape, cloth, lures, silence. If one of us dropped, the other ran the list and kept the room steady. That was the deal. Night fell easier. The herd noise moved far east and faded under the wind. Once an hour, we sent a short pattern to hold them there. We used just enough. We slept in turns and kept watch. I don't know what day 2 or 3 will bring. Maybe a helo, maybe a convoy, maybe radio voices that come and go. Maybe nothing at all. But the tower is still ours. The plan works. We'll test it in the morning, and the morning after that. And if we need to, we'll write a new page, together. Thanks for listening. If this helped you think about your own plan, subscribe. Leave a comment with where you're listening from and keep your lights low. We'll be here, 1 shift at a time, holding the field until someone relieves us or the radios go quiet.